Right. Okay, so I'm Eric Walder. I'm the Director of Research Computing at William & Mary. And our first speaker, Sarvani Chadlapaka, I think I did. It comes to us from UC Merced, where she's the Director of Cyber Infrastructure. And she's involved in a number of different things, like PERC, the PERC meeting, Internet 2, and of course she's the director of her Women in HPC chapter and highly involved in that, in mentoring, etc. So take it away, Sarvani.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me. I am Sarvani Chadlapaka, Director of Cyber Infrastructure and Research Technologies at University of California, Merced. I want to share with you a little bit of background on my career path, my learnings, and what I found to help thrive in this high-performance computing or in general technology fields, being a woman of color in this field. So my team builds large-scale research computing, helps researchers move across their research computing tiers, from their laptop to regional computing to national supercomputing centers to local computing resources, by providing these tools and training for them to be successful in their computational research. I started my career with a background in electrical engineering. My majors is in embedded systems and wireless communications. So my first step into the tech world was as a high-performance computing systems engineer. I was working on optimizing the voice and video codecs on the high-performance computing systems. So I was working in a small company, so I wore many hats. I was developing the product code, testing the systems, and even handling the systems administration. So what this gave me is exposure into the power of high-performance computing systems and the potential that they hold for their users. 2 years in, I transitioned into a systems administrator role at University of California, Merced. So I saw this as I just wanted to see. I saw this as an opportunity for sharing my expertise with students and connect with students and help them use these powerful tools for their research use cases. So as a part of this role, I managed the systems. I was working with the researchers as a research facilitator, and I worked with their data. So I was wearing many hats here as well. One of the major accomplishments that I had at the time were to re-architect the high-performance computing campus-wide cluster, and also increasing the number of users on the system to 900%. So for me, the experience of interacting with the students, the community that I serve, has a significant piece of my heart. There are, at UC Merced, there's 60% of our students, they come from underrepresented minorities. And more than half of our students are first-generation college, first in their families to attend college. So for me, it's become even more part of my work that I want to build bridges and reduce the barriers to access to these technology and tools. So through my years in these roles, I realized that there's two things that I'm really passionate about. One is to build the technology, and two is to build the communities that use these technologies. So then I realized that I needed to be more involved in making that happen through building the policies, building the strategy for our research computing program. So I moved into the role as a high-performance computing manager and eventually became the director of the team that I started out at. So for me, the important piece was for to build the communities and not just the systems. So as people, as women in tech and women in HPC, women in cybersecurity, we are our jobs come with the responsibility to build these large systems, but also to make sure that the users and can understand, can access, can leverage these systems effectively is just as important. So for me, having building those communities and even leveraging those communities has become an important piece of the work that we do. And pursue what energizes you. So for me, it took a couple of years to realize that I like technology, but I also really like working with people. So whatever that is for you in terms of technical innovation, leadership, collaboration, go for it, pursue it wholeheartedly. Now, during this phase of my career, I have attended conferences like Oklahoma Supercomputing Conference, Supercomputing, and per practice and experience in advanced research computing conferences. At these events, it was like I had a sudden realization that I had found my people. So these were professionals across various institutions that were dealing with the same challenges that I face in research computing. So what really stood out to me is that these RCD, research computing and data leaders, were not just addressing issues at their own institution level, but they were tackling these challenges at a much larger scale. And their work was benefiting not just their institutions, but also the entire community. So that's where I was inspired as well. I realized that I just didn't want to learn from these communities, but also to contribute into solving the bigger problems that we all have. So as I was contributing to these communities, I had and I continue to have the opportunity to work alongside these leaders and really experience the way that they work and get that mentorship experience from these leaders. As a woman of color in tech, I felt especially drawn to women in HPC community. I my career path was I fell into research computing, and then I realized that there was this whole sea of expertise here. I quickly realized that there is a gap for early career women in high performance computing to to get the mentorship that they require. So I realized this, and then I went and started one. I started the worldwide Women in HPC Early Career Mentorship Program that served 4 continents and across 50 people in the 2 years that I was sharing the mentorship program. So for me, this experience is truly rewarding because now I felt like, okay, I was able to take my experience and create something that the rest of the technologists, women in their early careers are able to take advantage of, and that helped elevate women in this field and lower barriers for women in this field. So in addition to my work with women in HPC, I served on several other committees and initiatives like Campus Advanced Research Computing Consortium, Internet 2 Inclusivity Steering Committee, task, was a speaker, author, and program chair for both technical programs and DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusivity programs at these conferences. So my thriving in tech, so these are all my professional affiliations at this time. So thriving in HPC or thriving in technology takeaways for me are three things, right? One is to find your people, joining in communities of like-minded professionals, seeking out these groups, seeking out these conferences and places where you can both share and learn from these communities can be invaluable. Two is to being a part of the solution. So when you find a problem that's larger than just for you, to figure out ways to contribute to these large systemic challenges in your field is going to be important. And three is create what's missing. You see a gap with your own unique lived experience, don't hesitate to step up and create something that's going to be beneficial for the broader community. So for me, it's about for me it's about all these things, right? How do we find solutions? How do we become a part of these communities? And how do we engage with challenges and find the solutions um, to do this? I hope this is helpful. Thank you all again. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Sutani.
If there's anyone that has a question, I'd like to go before me. I definitely have a question, but is there anyone that's not clapping that would like to raise their hand for a question? Well, all right. So I definitely have something struck me in your talk that I think I deal with all the time, which is the balance between, building the computer and building the community around the computer. This is something that I struggle with a lot. It's very hard to balance, and I wonder if you could give any tips on how you have managed, or how you have managed to improve that in your area, or any tips on, do you have certain staff members dedicated to certain things, etc.?
The way we have our staff right now, we have a dedicated systems person, and we have a person that works with researchers, research facilitator. But then what makes this collaboration the most fruitful is the conversations that they have amongst themselves. Like, we have a person with us, a little bit of systems expertise that is advocating for research use cases, and another person with a lot of vast technological expertise that is telling us how to optimize the systems. So without them both talking, without them both collaborating, and without them understanding the problem at hand, and also the challenges that our researchers face, it's hard to have a fruitful system that works for the end users. So having these strong collaborations and like you said, Eric, balance and communication between these teams or between these people is critical in getting to that endpoint solution.
All right, thank you. Yeah, it's a very difficult challenge. Does anyone else have a question? Put it in the chat as well if you just are too shy. Okay. Well, thank you, Sarvani, very much. We're going to move on to, I guess, Wendy Wild is going to be our second speaker. If you want to, how are we going to do this since you don't have a slide deck? I guess you can just talk.
I'll just talk.
Let me introduce you first. So Wendy Wild comes to us. She's one of our local Virginia people. She comes to us from Christopher Newport University, where she's the Information Security Officer and the Graham-Leach-Billy Act Officer. Is that what the GLBA is? Okay, great.
Yep.
I just read about that this morning. You've had a lot of experience, over 20 years experience in cybersecurity in the Department of Defense and your higher education experience. And so we look forward to hearing from you. So please take it away when you're ready.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Eric, for the invitation. Happy to come chat with everybody for a little bit today. So as Eric said, I've been doing this for a long time, a little over 20 years, so I started when I was 12. By the way, I try to have a sense of humor when I'm speaking to large groups of people. So again, I did a lot of DoD contracting work. I did work at NASA, and much like Sarvani, I kind of fell into the HPC research computing field many, many moons ago. My experience now is just a little bit different. I've built an information security program over the course of the last almost 5 years at CNU. Not that I was building it from scratch, but there's a lot of moving parts and pieces. So, that starts with your security governance, which starts at the top, your leadership buy-in, what's the mission of the university that you're trying to achieve, and making sure that that security isn't sprinkled on top, but it's baked in as part of the processes that you're so that the university can complete their mission essential function, which is ultimately to educate students and to bring in more students. And in the case of, research computing, of course, research computing and hopefully, more money. Some of the challenges we face in that particular unique role is always first and foremost a lack of resources. I think everybody's aware of tight budgets and shrinking budgets. So you kind of have to learn to do things and think outside the box, maybe a little bit different ways of doing things. You might not have a staff of 20. Uh, I am still currently a staff. We are a mighty team of 2 out of a department that is, I think we have 33 people now, if I remember correctly. But our IT department is fully staffed, and we are the only 2 who specialize in the cybersecurity role. So my information security analyst and we got to wear a lot of different hats. And one of those hats, is also such things as compliance. And a product of that, as one of my former colleagues who's also on this call will recall, is audit. We undergo internal audit, external audits. We recently underwent an external OSIG audit, and the topics could range from a system all the way to something like Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act or cybersecurity audits. So there's a lot of balls you got to juggle at the same time. You have to respond to these audits, but you also have to make sure that the security program that you've built has the necessary policies, procedures, standards, and controls in place so that people know what the rules of the road are, right? And then, of course, compliance standards change. So recently, VITA moved off of their former security standard. Now they're on SEC 530. So then you have to revise your security standards to make sure that you're in compliance with those particular security standards. GLBA is a different beast in and of itself, which is why we wrote a separate GLBA security program. And with that comes some significant responsibility, such as you are the designated person. If something goes sideways, I'm the one that owns it. The university also would own it, and there are personal financial fines possibly if there is an incident or something that goes wrong. And of course, speaking of incidents, we also have to maintain an incident response program. In the unfortunate and hopefully unlikely event that there is a security breach or a security incident, we have to be ready to respond. We have to have the tools and resources in place to respond and the necessary training and procedures. Um, and, and speaking back to something that our previous speaker mentioned, our university and our friends in our engineering department, they have had what's called a PCSE faculty mentoring program, and they've been doing it for 6 or 7 years. And this is where they try to bring in young women, and in some cases, if there's young men that also want to be involved, and they participate in a mentorship program. And about 3 years ago, the department chair contacted me out of the blue, and he said, "Hey, it suddenly occurred to me that our ISO is a female, and you'd be a great addition to this program, and would you be interested?" So I was one of the inaugural non-faculty members of CNU that participated in that program, and I'm on my third mentee who requested me by name. She had heard good things about me, and she personally requested that I mentor her. And again, it's, we have weekly discussions. What are your goals? What are you looking for? Where can I help provide resources, opportunity? My mentor last year did get a summer internship at JLab. So that was something that I kind of helped usher her through, guided her through that process. And my current mentee is also, she's currently working as a student worker at NASA. But when she realized I also used to work over at NASA, she's like, oh, yeah, she might actually know some things. So again, it's pretty broad, the things that I do on a day-to-day basis. In the past week, I've developed 25 system security plans, which, again, I'm trying to get spun up for our audit season, which is going to kick off probably at the beginning of the year, and just make sure that everything from last year's audit season is complete. We're also getting ready to do some more our annual tabletop exercises. That's another big part of my job is training. So we conduct security awareness training, phishing simulations, role-based training. But all in all, the one thing I've noted over my last 20 years is 20 plus years ago when I started going to cybersecurity conferences again, I think I could count on one hand the number of women who were in the room, and that included my day job. I mean, I was maybe one of 15 out of 15 were all men. Um, and the same to some degree still applies today, although I will say the opportunity is certainly there, and the resources are there as long as the guidance is there and the support of senior leadership to encourage, women to apply and to be promoted within the ranks, especially in the technological field. Because I think my mother used to call me the greatest sleuth on earth. Like I'm like a dog with a bone. When I have a problem I can't solve, especially if it's a technical one, I just don't let it go. So sometimes to my discredit, but other than that, that's about, I mean, unless anybody has any questions for me.
Well, thank you. I definitely have a question. I wanted to also mention that I also heard good things about you from your former colleague who's on the call. I have also wanted to know, I was very curious when I was looking up the GLBA and what that stood for. Why is that? What makes that such a big, I'm a little ignorant to it, so forgive me, but is that such a lift that you have, that you got a second title based on it? I was just wondering why that's a specific thing. Is it a difficult subject that I'm not aware of, how hard it is?
So I will just bring it up or my notes real quick because sometimes I forget. Sorry.
Hmm?
Bear with me for 1 second. I can find it. There we go. Plus, I have to admit, I also got new glasses, so I'm still trying to figure out how to see on a daily basis. So Graham Leach Bliley, just to give you a little bit of background, it's a little bit different than PCI DSS data, your credit card data. This is to secure the confidentiality of customer information. And GLBA data is usually it's usually it stems from a financial transaction or a financial institution. So if you extend credit to someone, that information, so your name, social security card, payment information, banking information, then becomes what we call NPI or non-personal or non-public information. So in and around that, you have to add additional security controls uh, because it's per the Federal Trade Commission, so it's FTC Safe Reg 314.2. And last June, it completely got overhauled, and you had to have certain things in place in the event that you had to go and undergo an FTC audit. So one of those things was you have to designate a program officer first and foremost, and that is your responsible party, albeit me. They can also designate other people, but a lot of times when you're in the process of designating somebody, because ultimately the person who's going to be your GLBA program officer has to be in charge of your security program, most people are going to go not it and point at me. Then you have to identify which departments have GLBA data. So if you don't know where your data is and you don't know how your data is classified, that could be problematic, particularly if you had departments that, such as, financial aid, probably the business office. If they do anything like that, definitely IT, I'm sure, has GLBA data. And then, so what we did was we built a program with a GLBA committee with representatives from each of these departments. And then from there, we have a governance committee that we just make aware of. They are our governance committee if there's changes coming down the road. Then you have to do risk assessments, and you have to do system risk assessments. So if you don't know, if you don't have, aren't performing your risk assessments once every year and reviewing them every 3 years, you could get your hand slapped for not having that information. We also have to provide GLBA training to the in-scope department. So that was another training program that I had to develop and deliver to these people. And then, of course, there's also, your information storage and disposal, and that's not limited to electronic media. So there was a clean desk policy. So if you leave a bunch of paper sitting out on your desk with NPI data and it gets swiped, that could be a violation if it was reported or you were audited. And then you have to have your incident response plan in place and documented. And then third-party vendor risk management and your oversight of your third parties. So that was one thing I didn't mention earlier is, everybody's moving a lot of things to the cloud. So you have to analyze the third-party vendors, SOC 2 reports, HEC-VATs. If they are PCI compliant, then you have to get their AOCs and all kinds of documents. And then, but beyond that, they're supposed to be providing quarterly vulnerability scans. They're supposed to be providing you annual internal pen test reports. You're supposed to be reviewing all the system logs. So as if we didn't have enough to do on a day-to-day basis, this shift and revision of GLBA last year kind of upped the ante for everything that we do and kind of added uh, a big responsibility on, sometimes an already overstressed team. And lastly, the other thing we have to do is an annual report out to the Board of Visitors. So we keep them apprised of what's going on. And if there's changes, and it's not necessarily a GLBA specific security review or presentation. It can be everything about information security program. Where are we falling short? Which risks have we identified? Where do we need resources? If there is an incident and we get called to talk to them, they're going to go, well, what happened and how did you let this happen? Or everything's going great, we're doing wonderful. And we also do those reports in writing.
Well, that is a lot of stuff. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We had another hand up from Caitlin Goyle. If you'd like to ask.
Yeah. I'm sorry for joining late. Yeah, I had my hand up is because question I had for you for me was I am currently back in the job market due to like the tech industry, consulting industry collapsed back in January, and like most of my focus was around data privacy, data governance. So I guess a question I had for you is like I know there's not like a lot of jobs in that sphere. Is what advice you could provide for someone that's probably like searching for a job to like stay within the cybersecurity, but can also apply those skills to like a different aspect, if that
You
makes.
know, yeah, I mean, one avenue you might want to consider, and don't be alarmed when I say this, is IT auditing. That is a place where you will get your feet uber wet in compliance and privacy and risk management. And I used to work with our director of audit, who she retired earlier this year, but we were looking for an IT auditor at CNU. I think it was for almost a year, as are many institutions of higher ed are all looking for IT auditors. And if you have an IT background with a compliance background, any auditor can teach you how to audit against any security standard. So I would recommend looking there as well. And then by default, you're going to stay in the compliance realm, right? And at least you'll have that experience. It's valuable experience, which then, if you find an opportunity back that's more compliance, like if a compliance officer type role, it will roll right back into it.
All right, are there any other questions? And does that answer your question?
That was great. I was just like, going through this, trying to find like, not a lot
You're,
of stuff where
it's
like,
like, I don't
stuff with
know.
like data privacy, GDPR, CIP, like, CCPA. So that definitely did help. Like I know that I was getting like, okay, where else
Yeah,
I could look. So that definitely was helpful.
I know nobody grows up and says, "Hey, I want to be an IT auditor," or "I want to be an auditor," but it's definitely an opportunity to utilize those skills, and it could open up other avenues as well.
Well, thanks for asking that question. I'm sure there's other people that have similar types of questions. All right. Well, thank you very much, Wendy.
Very welcome.
And yeah, maybe we'll see you again. You're always welcome to come to the meeting if it's something that interests you on the topic, and the same for you, Savarni. Okay, so we will go to our final speaker, last but not least. And this is my colleague from William and Mary. I was not going to say your name.
Let me just do that, Eric.
Okay, good.
I have an impossibly difficult name. So I'm Iria Jufrida. I'm a colleague of Eric from William and Mary. I work at the law school, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. Can I take it away, Eric?
Absolutely. I just wanted to mention your involvement in the Commonwealth cybersecurity. I don't know if you're going to mention that, but that's something that if you're involved in that in some of the Virginia schools, Aria
That's right.
is very involved in that, or at least she was until recently. I don't know if she is now.
Yeah.
All right, so take it away, please.
I will. And Caitlin, I don't know if you have time to stay until the end, but my last slide, I included some resources at a website called Cyberseek. I don't know if you ever used it, but it's quite helpful to look at the skill set, which sounds you already have a very sophisticated skill set, and what your skills can land you in terms of opportunities. And I come from, and in fact, that allows me to sort of go ahead. So in terms of introducing myself, as I mentioned, I work at the law school. I am a lawyer through and through. I don't have a single technical bone in my body. So you may ask yourself, what on earth are you doing here? And in addition to being a friend of Eric, I wanted to bring a slightly different perspective on sort of the concept of cybersecurity in the cybersecurity industry, and tell you, I'm very happy to have at least you to talk to, Caitlin, to look at the legal industry. Because some of the keywords that you used and that the previous speakers have used in terms of compliance, the GLB Act, this is a lawyer's fault. So you're welcome. We're creating new professions. They're very difficult, but I think there are opportunities in that domain. So look at that also as well. So how did I become interested in cybersecurity? It's a little bit more of an accident than the previous two speakers who were very competent in the area and therefore developed their skills. I was actually a commercial litigator in London, so I was just fighting it out in court or in arbitration for relatively big clients. And I'd stayed in touch with a professor here, William and Mary, where I, in the past had gotten my my master's degree, who called me and said, "What do you know about AI?" And I just said nothing, at which point he'd have been perfectly entitled to say goodbye. Instead, he said, "Fantastic, lots of opportunities of learning. Why don't you come back to William and Mary?" And I did. And so my journey in this domain is a very, very young journey, despite my wrinkles. But I think is one of the most fascinating aspects of my entire career. So cybersecurity becomes a domain where I sort of stumble upon as I try to think about what implications are brought on the legal system by the advance of technologies like AI, and so more automation and what it means for the legal world as we understand it. You all know the laws are relatively stale, they're very complex. The legal domain is not one that strikes to mind for innovation. And so how do we react, and therefore how society reacts to these kind of technologies? In terms of challenges that I faced and faced to this day, I think that a line that I could hear through the two previous speakers is that this domain is interdisciplinary. Our first speaker talked, I had to take some notes because I thought it was absolutely wonderful. You know, I like to build technology and I like to build communities that use that technology. And one of the components of this exercise of building communities and therefore being aware of what the risks are, what the implications are, comes also from other domains. I think it's phenomenal that people, that's, you know, the scholars and research scientists from these domains are looking out of the technology at the human being at the other end. And I think the lawyers have not historically done a good job to interface with specialists from other domains. So one of my big challenges is that I have to learn a new language because I don't understand literally the terminology. And I know, for instance, Wendy just mentioned you have to learn the legal language, right? Because of the responsibilities that now you have as a consequence of a federal statute. And I think the word that I like is a little bit of William and Mary buzzword, so forgive me for the little marketing pitch here. But the idea is, you know, you have to keep learning, and to remain a lifelong learner means that sometimes you need to have those discussions about, I really don't understand what you're talking about. Eric, can you guide me through the process? I don't understand the assumptions that you're making because they're not the assumptions that I make. And so cybersecurity, what I try to tell my students, is not just code, it's not just technology, and it's not just an IT problem. Cybersecurity is very much a societal problem, is very much a human problem. And I just put 3 of the latest big data privacy and cybersecurity breaches. I think with 23andMe, I don't know how many millions of very sensitive data have been harvested and probably sold on the dark web. And you know, we're talking about literally genetic information that, by the way, has also been used in the past by law enforcement to revise some cases that had gone cold, and now the data provided some familial connection between the DNA that was on file with the cousin twice removed that was trying to find out whether they had an Italian in them, has allowed law enforcement to resolve some issues, which does cause some ethical challenges from the perspective of, is this the kind of relationship that we want with government, right? I can understand victims of crime who say, well, yes, why not? But on the other side, it does raise the question that we lawyers think about in terms of surveillance. Do we really want to be surveilled? The amount of data that I, as a non-tech person, generate on a daily basis, if checked and controlled, could certainly interfere, for instance, with my decision on how to exercise my right to vote. And so here we have it's a piece of tech, it's just a computer. It's not just a computer, there's so much more behind it. And so when I talk to my students about cybersecurity, I try to tell them that it's very likely that their client will see cybersecurity only as an IT issue. And it is their job to explain to them that it's most certainly not an IT issue. It's an issue that certainly involves the legal team. Legal team has to participate. Wendy talked about creating processes, governance, and all of those documents should, and I hope that General Counsel was involved, because there's a very big liability component for whether it's a higher ed institution or commercial client or a not-for-profit organization. It needs to involve HR, because we need to be trained. Again, Wendy, you suggested that you have created and probably you deploy frequently phishing training, right? You want to be sure that your faculty, I know that there are some colleagues from William and Mary, I have now learned not to click on the email, but it took a couple of goes, right? Because my finger, this is an email, it looks like something very interesting, why don't I click on it? And so that requires not just the IT specialist, but it also requires the human resource team to be willing to participate in the education program, because the weakest link is actually not the technology. I am your weakest link, right? As the person who truly doesn't understand, and maybe I just understand enough to be dangerous, right? And so it's important, I think, maybe the audience here is sort of preaching to the choir, because you are interested, you're here because you are interested in this domain. And if so, please bring in your friends, please bring in your colleagues from other domains and try to tell them that cybersecurity is very much their concern as well. Because the scale at which some of the problems, I mentioned SolarWinds, some of the problems, some of the vulnerabilities that have been shown are no longer just a business problem or a government problem. They are a national security problem. And so, Caitlin, you actually are participating in national security defense, which may well happen in the private sector if that's where you're working, but also think about federal government jobs where people like you should be paid your weight in gold, because you add expertise that is actually not easy to find in the government sector, because the private sector pays so much more. And so in this moment of as the market moves, not necessarily in your favor in this moment, I would grab the opportunity and look at what the federal government may provide. And when I speak with undergraduate students who are sort of uncertain about cybersecurity, many of them select themselves out. I just said it at the beginning, I'm not a technical person. I can barely do basic maths. I don't understand code. I literally cannot code. But using that as an excuse not to be interested in this domain, I think is a way to cheat themselves, to cheat oneself. Cybersecurity requires a variety of skills, including, as we were talking about, changing the behavior of people like me who are sort of click prone, requires understanding of human psychology. Social engineering has nothing to do with cybersecurity from the technical perspective, but everything to do with cybersecurity in terms of exploiting some kinds of vulnerability. Communication is very important. So students that come from humanities and other domains can leverage those skills of being able to convey very complex information, try to read a statute, and then convey to the IT team or the security team what the statute implies. And one of the skills that I hope all of my students, including your law students, understand that they need to take away from their higher education experience is critical thinking. And again, the two previous speakers, both of them talked about thinking outside the box, resolving problems. None of this can be done in a linear fashion. It needs to be done in a circular fashion. And so I quite like this image that shows in a business, but I'm sure that the same model, if you wish, could be applied into higher ed or not-for-profit sector, where you see the cyber and data protection is at the center, but it needs to be the focus of the executive team, the board of directors. Wendy mentioned, security starts from the top. If leadership is not interested in protecting the vast amount of data that any organization has, in higher education, we have the additional hurdle of thinking about FERPA. There's particular sort of educational records that need to be protected in a separate way. So if leadership is not interested, then I'm afraid the problem tumbles all the way down to students who ultimately will suffer the consequences. But it needs to involve the finance team. We heard how they are being involved and trained and whatnot. It needs to involve legal counsel. And I mean, you're capable of reading it yourself. But the idea is that this is definitely not just a one domain problem-solving exercise. It involves a number of sort of disciplines. And so going back to the point that Eric mentioned at the beginning, in Virginia, the General Assembly has invested a significant amount of money to fund an initiative called CCI, Commonwealth Cyber Initiative, that has a variety of projects that are going on in different regions in Virginia. Sort of William and Mary is in the COVA region, which is headed by ODU. They are sort of the lead node, but I know the CNU of other organizations are all participating. So the link that I put on this slide is to internships. So there it may well be that these resources are aimed at a much younger audience than perhaps is attending this presentation. But if so, please share it with your younger siblings or acquaintances. Cyberseek is the website that I mentioned in the past. Through COBA CCI, we created a professor who has now left William and Mary, but she was the head of an experiential program, getting students from all sorts of background, getting involved in cybersecurity in the broad sense of the term. So some law students were placed in local businesses, some computing students were working with me as a law researcher. And so we were trying to understand each other and to work collaboratively. There's a ton of internships out there. I think there's many more in cybersecurity than there are in other domains. And I think that often students see the lure of the big bucks that one can get work in the private sector. Nothing wrong with that, but the federal government and state government also are phenomenal professional opportunities to enrich oneself and to have a true impact by way of one profession. So I put a couple of links for internships on the slide. And the last one is an incredible professor. She's from Temple, so not a Virginian, but Professor Regge has developed a variety of courses trying to encourage minority, in particular minority women, to come forward and be interested in cybersecurity, because it's not all about computing. She has a social engineering case study, which is all about social engineering, and it shows students that what they can contribute to sort of the cybersecurity of an institution by whichever domain they come through. I'm going to stop here, so there's a few minutes for questions, and I want to say thank you very much to Eric for the invitation.
Thank you very much. Does anyone besides me have a question? I'm trying to see if there are any. Of course, you can put them in the chat. All right. Well, I just wanted to, maybe it's more of a philosophical question, but, you know, what things that I worry about are just, you know, I'm not really a cybersecurity person, but I worry about like things getting hacked and people getting, you know, and the way I always look at it is that you mentioned at one point that the humans are the weak link, and certainly that's true. And that's, you know, the phishing is probably the worst thing that, you know, problem we have nowadays. But don't you feel like it's like sort of an arms race, and the criminals are dedicated and everyone else is sort of, yeah, it's their job, but they have like a million other things they're doing too. And so do you have such a negative view on it that I do, that it's inevitably going to be something that people are going to regularly lose, like the breaches you mentioned?
I think that asking this kind of philosophical questions to lawyers are negative by nature. Okay, we see risk and we are scared. So of course I see the world bleak and dark, and this is terrible. The upside of this is that many institutions, states and federal government, and push also from not-for-profit, are trying to teach us basic cyber hygiene. And it's going to take time before, especially the older generation, becomes a little bit more conscious in terms of what data can do. I remember that in the early days of Facebook, everybody would post pictures of their children. And there's now a shift of parents saying, if you took a picture of my kid, please don't post it on social media. Now, that's a teeny weeny aspect, but that's data that then gets used by AI systems to train for facial recognition technology, for instance, right? So there's the component of cyber hygiene is important. I think that what we're seeing now is a convergence of sophisticated criminality and essentially terrorism. There are some big sort of hackers groups out there that are literally funded by hostile nation states. If they are dead set to break into a system, they will break into a system. So even lawyers have to understand that this is not about eliminating risk, this is about mitigating risk. And mitigating risk has to involve speaking with people from other domains because we just don't know even what that means. Right. So talking to the likes of you and Servani and Wendy and trying to understand what the vulnerability may be. In the SolarWinds that I mentioned briefly, there was actually not necessarily a leak of data, but the system had somebody looking at the system from within it for 6 months. So they were not looking at what pieces of data, what a software update went from A to B. They were looking at the flow of information from A to where B is. And B was also DoD, right? So understanding that kind of framework provides an arsenal to hostile nations that is to be taken into account. So saying I don't do technology, it doesn't matter. If you're interested in national security, this is an incredible area to get involved in.
All right, thank you. Anyone else before we thank the speakers? Oh, there's more clapping. All right. All right. Well, I just wanted to thank all three of you. Very interesting conversation. And I think that a lot of you shared some things that I wasn't sort of expecting. So I'm glad to learn a lot from all three of you. And we have each actually got to help someone in real time. So that's even better. And if we have like 2 more minutes, 3 more minutes, Jennifer, is it possible that, or I can share my screen and show the next event?
Yeah, you can go ahead and do that.
Okay, I will share my screen, or I'll try here. Okay, let me see here. Okay, I'm gonna go to the events page. Oops. Oh, I can't. Oh, what's wrong here? There we go. So our next event will be lightning talks by students, and there's still time to sign up, I believe. Am I incorrect about that? Yeah, by October 15th. So this is when we have various students come and give 3-minute talks. They work with a mentor from the Women in HPC group, and you did get about 3 minutes to tell us about 1 or 2 slides to tell us about your research. And it's a good way to sort of, tighten up your skills, especially if you're new. It's a very low stress environment because we're all very friendly here. And so if you're interested in that, please sign up and we'll give you more information. And if you haven't signed the sign-in sheet, please do it before you go. The link is in the chat. All right, well, we're a teeny bit early, but I think that will help most of us. All right, so thank you very much to